Let's start off with introducing yourself.
My name is Roman Gudzyuk. I'm a purchasing manager currently with Chant Engineering, 3 years. My history is primarily in procurement, purchasing, project management, and as a senior level or senior buyer at various aerospace organizations.
Awesome.
So I
Um,
have over 15 years of experience in purchasing.
how big is the company that you work for?
The current organization is it's a small business. It's not that big. 50 plus employees,
Okay.
very family niche oriented business. But I would say 13 years of my experience are higher level corporate experience.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
So what categories of spend are you currently responsible for?
We purchase a lot of structural steel,
Hmm.
hydraulic components, electrical components, MRO consumables, hardware, things of that nature. Assemblies for our engineering systems. What we do is we make pull test machines for rope and wire industry,
Okay.
but we also do various unique prototype projects for the government, aerospace industry as well. So it's a project to project basis.
Very cool. I just
Yeah,
talked to somebody who said that anything hydraulic usually takes longer to get in. Long lead times on that stuff.
that is correct. That's
Got
a
a
true
guess?
statement. Yes.
I asked him about a hypothesis about why that was. What is your hypothesis about why that is?
I think things started off during COVID. A lot of the supply chain was disrupted significantly, and
Hmm.
after COVID hit, some companies went out of business, some were bought out. Some companies saw it as opportunities to buy other companies, but it never fully recovered as far as
Hmm.
lead times. And I think companies are just becoming more careful how much stock they carry and how much they expose themselves to inventory. So from that perspective, I guess it changed a little bit. But I think the industry has kind of downsized a little bit as well. So I'm definitely seeing that. Um, I don't know. Hydraulics in particular, it seems like they're switching more to electrical,
Oh,
which
interesting.
which is more expensive, but a lot of for our smaller applications, it does the job, even though
Yeah.
it's more expensive. So I think some part of that is affecting it.
Yeah.
But a
No.
lot of it is downsizing and consolidation in terms of suppliers, what they want to do.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I like that hypothesis. What is the scope of your job?
I
Big question.
yeah, everything, everything procurement. I mean, the way we operate is, engineers spec out bills of material for the assemblies we need to manufacture, and they release that to us. I have three buyers under me right now, and
Okay.
my duty is to make sure that materials flowing in just in time. We don't have a lot of wiggle room. We don't do like my current position is very unique and very different than what I'm used to. We don't do a lot of forecasting. We don't do a lot of stock. It's per project,
Mm.
different parts every time, and that makes it chaotic a bit.
Yeah.
So I have to make sure that materials flowing in on time to the correct lead time, even though sometimes it's not feasible from a material availability perspective.
Hmm.
And I need to make sure that the data is flowing correctly to my buyers. So I'm a very data oriented person.
Nice. Yeah.
So the data has to be correct from our ERP system and the way it's inputted by our engineers and our planning department.
Yeah.
So I control that kind of workflow to some degree.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
You mentioned the ERP system. What kind of software are you using every day?
It's called Max ECI. I'm not sure how popular it is in the States, but I think they have around 30,000 users globally or so. So they all kind of do the same thing to some extent. The ERP systems, right? It's all how you input it, how you customize it to the individual organization.
Hmm.
Um,
So is that the primary software that you're in every day? Are there other ones that kind of sit on the outside of that, if that is the primary one?
that is the primary one. For reporting and things like that, we utilize Excel spreadsheets and Access database.
Yeah. Um, what's the hardest thing about your job?
Hardest thing about my job, it's being aligned, making sure that my team is aligned with engineers, with project management, in terms of how the material flows and the
Mm,
impacts that it causes. So I guess relaying that to also to customer service or account representatives on the other side, on the supplier distribution side. When you're buying one piece of something that's $50, the person on the other end doesn't understand the impact of when you have to deliver a $1.5 million contract and only that $50 part is missing. So relaying that correctly and the impact of it is difficult at times because it requires escalation, it requires pressure, it
oh
requires
yeah,
um,
can totally see
things.
how that is
Yeah,
a
yeah.
challenge. Um, yeah, can you talk about a time where technology or software has gotten in your way of doing your job?
Um, that's a good question. When technology has gotten in the way of doing my job, I don't think I
Or,
can. I have a good example where technology
yeah,
got in the way.
or like if
Um,
it ever feels more like a friction instead of a an effective tool.
yeah, I guess in terms of like you know let's say, for example, the ERP system that we utilize, it's whoever creates their ERP system, they make it customizable only to a certain degree.
Hmm.
And a lot of the manual inputs at order creation and things like that, that I think that's a bit painful.
Sure.
And it could have been much more easier, could have been much more automated, where you can use spreadsheets to upload things into and things like that. Um, a lot of that I think stems from the cost and licensing perspective. Small
Sure. Sure.
businesses small business that I work for can't necessarily afford the same licensing agreements and costs to subscribe to versus a billion-dollar corporation. So
Hmm.
we're not able to implement. We're not able to 100% implement the ERP system to its full capacity from that
Yeah.
perspective, and that's I guess somewhat our fault, but at the same time, the system prevents us from doing certain things as well.
Totally get it. Totally
Yeah.
get it. Yeah. I've heard too, in talking to people, that a lot of the times purchasing, like as a function, doesn't often kind of get the respect that it deserves. So in some ways, technology solutions often go to help other maybe seemingly more flashy things.
That's a valid point. That is a valid point. I think purchasing. I mean, I view purchasing as a critical, part of any company,
Absolutely.
especially if you're growing and if you have processes that are being established and you want a good workflow of things. It's a critical department to have for any organization. However, that does happen from time to time. Sales, and I've seen that actually happen on our end, where sales gets prioritized with uh, certain technologies, certain applications versus us. I mean, we're just almost kind of like on the tail end of things.
Hmm.
You
It's
get
funny
what you
because you're the
get.
first one. You're the first ones to get the action when the job comes through.
Exactly, exactly. We're the first ones that handle the problems that the problems that we need to solve. We don't always get the support technologically. I would say, yeah.
What makes you look strategic to your boss?
I come from a background of strategic purchasing, where I differentiate purchasing and strategic purchasing as two different
Oh,
kind
interesting.
of
Okay.
yeah
What can you talk about that a little bit? Because I'm not familiar
yeah
with. I wouldn't know how to
yeah.
talk about those differences.
Purchasing, it can be just a regular buyer. It can be a very cookie cutting type of approach, where if you have a planning department that releases a bill of material, that's just a matter of releasing, the you have demand, you see demand in the system. You know that you need to purchase something. You see a job that's coming up in the forecast, and you just buy into that job with approved suppliers. There's no thought process behind that. There's
Mm,
just simple button pushing, data entry, process the order, sign it, proof check it that the pricing is correct, and that's it. Um, that's what I would call just a regular purchasing or a regular buyer position. Strategic purchasing or strategic buyer, that's somebody that's more involved in contracts. That's more involved with negotiations, long-term agreements. This is one reason why a buyer in the aerospace industry can make $120,000 a year versus a buyer in a regular, electronic manufacturing facilities making 60,000. The decision making process is very different.
Mm.
There's a lot more
Okay.
strategy involved. There's a lot more long term strategy involved. For example, when I worked at Zodiac Aerospace, not even actually. Let's make it a better example. Leonardo helicopters. Some of our contracts were for the life cycle of the aircraft, which is 30 years. So you have to in your contract, you have to include all those liabilities. You have to include, everything, everything from A to Z that might happen in the next uh, 30 years. You have to
30 years.
forecast that. Yeah, so you have to
Wow.
include labor indexes. You have to include unique formulas to make sure that the cost of labor for your supplier is increasing adequately, um, to the based on economic trends, if you will,
Hmm.
versus somebody that's just sitting and blindly just pressing buttons and just sending out orders. It's a very different animal.
Yeah,
So
that,
yeah,
that makes total sense. Can
yeah,
definitely see how that is much, much more involved. And you said you've been in a strategic, what you would consider a strategic purchasing position before.
correct. Yes.
How did you approach uh, negotiating with vendors or suppliers?
Well, there's different way. It depends what you're looking for out of a vendor, right?
Mm.
It depends what you're looking for out of a contract. Really depends on the type of contract that you're doing, the type of product. So it's not. I get this question asked a lot actually, but it's a very subjective question because it can be answered in different ways in different elements of purchasing. So, and when I was in the helicopter industry, you look for quality. You want the most reliable suppliers, period. That's number one. Then pricing comes after.
Mm.
And you look for stability. You look for long-term partnerships with companies that can survive those agreements long-term, long durations. So you have
Mm.
to look for those key points to make sure the company has history, that has reputable quality, based on previous history or similar parts that they've done already. And then you start looking at pricing. You start looking at budgets from there. And then that's one perspective. Another perspective is you already have solid agreements, and something happened to your supplier, and you need to strictly renegotiate pricing because something's over budget.
Yep.
That's a totally different approach than you just start looking at just cost negotiations,
Hmm.
in terms of whatever the volume is, whatever the timing is, and what I know is that everybody wants your business. Uh, Everybody's eager to sell you their services and product, but it's a matter of asking the right questions, like how they react in certain situations. It's almost like an interview at times.
Yeah.
When I interview my buyers, I interview my suppliers in the same manner. Uh, what do you do when we're mid-production and something is delayed? Where am I going to be on the escalation process? What information are you going to provide me? How are you going to handle this type of situation? So I asked those questions, and that's how I approached the negotiation table, by understanding what their reactions are, I guess, right?
Mm. Yeah. So that you're just like gauging the leverage that you have or don't have and apply
Correct.
it when necessary.
Correct.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you
Exactly.
always negotiate? Are there scenarios when you wouldn't?
Depends what we're talking about. I mean, if yes, short answer, yes. I'm a big negotiator. In my current position, especially, I have a lot of leverage to negotiate. When you're negotiating with, I deal a lot with machining companies, with uh, companies that make unique parts for us on
Yep.
every time. So a lot of that is labor and material cost. So I know
Hmm.
where the opportunities exist based on that. I know how much approximately the labor costs, and I know approximately how much raw material costs. So I know if a supplier is putting more than 50% or something like that on its margin, then I
Yeah.
see an opportunity there. Yeah.
Do you when you're sourcing something like that, like a custom made part,
Mhm.
um, do you ever start with a target price?
At times I do, and so this is where kind of our RFQ, multiple RFQs come to do RFQ before the project starts,
Hmm. Okay.
at budgeting stage, and then the final RFQ when project is released. Uh, and then you kind of understand between the quotation stage and the project release stage, where you're supposed to be approximately.
Okay.
So
So,
yeah,
and if you know approximately where you're supposed to land, you'll relay that to a supplier.
yes, yeah. I'll tell them that. Listen, especially if we already build a budget behind it,
Yeah,
I'll tell them that we need to be at approximately this level. Not like on a corporate level, like that's not a lot of times it's not acceptable. You're not supposed to kind of release your information before they quote it.
that's like showing
But
your cards early, right?
yeah, yeah. But there's another side to it. The other side to it is just you're saving time, and if you already have budget built for it, and you know the supplier pretty well, there's you can get things done just fairly quickly and without the hassle of going through the RFQ process or phase, which can be time consuming.
Yeah, yeah, yep. That makes perfect sense. Okay, just a couple more questions here on my list. What advice would you give to somebody coming and looking to be a purchaser?
What advice I would have? I would say always think long term. Be strategic in everything. Don't be don't be a buyer. Be a strategic buyer. That would be my number one. Um, don't let yourself get don't let yourself get plateaued. This industry is always evolving. Um, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot of new technologies coming out, especially with AI and things like that. Um, I think it's a very unique phase in supply chain that we're facing, and it's important to stay agile during this time. It's important to continue for continuous learning, evolving as a department, as a company, as an organization, and as a person.
Yeah, awesome. What you mentioned AI. What do you think about AI being used in procurement?
It's awesome. I mean, I use it in the simplest form. I use it to create, formulas in my Excel spreadsheets. I use it to proofread my emails at times. I use ask for suggestions on problem solving here and there.
Hmm.
It's almost like having it's an agent, right? Right now, it's an
Yeah.
agent stage. And you can ask the agent. It's like asking your friend, colleague who's sitting next to you to proofread a letter. You don't have to do that anymore. But it just opened to a lot more, 100 times a lot more, or
Yeah.
a million times. So I think it's hugely beneficial on that aspect, and automating things. I think it's just going to bring uh, more out of more out of productivity wise, right? I there's a lot of people who are scared about AI, but I read this interesting point about when calculators first came out, and they thought that's it. This is going to be the end of engineers. This is going to be the end of people are going to get stupid. But what ended up happening is that people just evolved, became more educated. Instead of learning, the basic math, now we're learning calculus, and now we're learning higher principles, mathematic principles than we used to. So it's the same thing with AI. We're just going to do bigger, better things.
Yeah, and that applies to purchasing too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it, with it quicker, better deals?
Definitely. Quicker, better deals, negotiations. For example, the 75-page contract that I have to review, it's going to take me a week to review that properly, to review all the verbiage to make sure there's nothing missed. I can scan that into ChatGPT right now, and that's a 1 minute thing. Um, you know, correct. Where do you see simple question: where do you see liabilities in my contract
Mm,
currently?
mm,
Where do you see problems? Is there any potential risks schedule wise? Do you forecast anything based on current economic trends? Do you see any historical data points where I should change, my indexes or something like that? I mean, it's a no-brainer.
yeah, awesome. If you had a magic wand and could make one thing in purchasing go away, what aspect would it be?
Hmm.
This is just a fun question.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Direction with accounting.
Yeah.
I think it's just some of those, some of those like checks and balances. So for like, actually, that's I said it jokingly, but there's some truth to that. You know, Accounting has to do a three-way match. They always have to have a packing list, a purchase order, and an invoice in order to
Hmm.
pay on something. It's from accounting principles. A lot of that can be removed potentially. That can be automated utilizing AI, for example. Those kind of repetitive
Mm.
manual things.
And
Another one. I actually have another example. I apologize if I interrupted. In max order purchasing. So we deal a lot with consumables and hardware, things that they're sometimes managed by vendors, VMI managed or vendor managed inventory.
okay.
That's number one, probably. That could be resolved using AI. It's a simple, honestly, a simple calculation, a simple algorithm formula that you can input into an ERP system potentially, and an AI-based system where an agent can spit out orders automatically without any type of manual influence from a buyer.
It's like
Um,
based on uh, the current inventory
Correct. Current
that you
inventory levels.
experience.
Let's say you have ten parts of something, and each of those parts has reordering points. If it reaches particular low
Hmm.
quantity of something, your system gauges that, and automatic as soon as it reaches that particular level, it automatically spits out an order and launches it to the particular supplier. Very easy, in my
Yeah,
opinion, to implement.
yeah, yeah. No, that's a good example. Um, okay, one last question. What's the most interesting thing that you've bought, or the most your favorite thing that you bought?
Favorite thing that I bought. We do a lot of unique things. I mean, from cargo rails for V-22 aircraft to hydraulic system. I would say so I was responsible for the power plant civilian tilt rotor aircraft in my previous job. So buying a full on buying two engines at once worth over $1 million. I think that was probably the most
That's
interesting.
awesome. That
Yeah,
is interesting. That's a good one. That's a good one
yeah,
on the list. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. This has been great.
definitely. Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate your time.